I am 28 years old, and my husband Mark, who is 30, and I were expecting our first child. The feeling was something I could never have prepared myself for. It was a quiet joy, a constant hum of excitement that lived just beneath my skin. We had wanted this for so long, and now that it was finally happening, every day felt like a small miracle. We spent our evenings talking about names and painting a nursery in soft shades of yellow and gray. It was our little bubble of happiness, perfect and complete. But bubbles are fragile, and I knew, deep down, that mine was floating dangerously close to a very sharp pin. That pin had a name. It was Chloe. My cousin Chloe and I were born only a few months apart. We grew up together, but we never grew close. Our lives had been a quiet, unspoken competition since we were children, a competition I never wanted to be a part of. When I got good grades, she had to get better ones. When I made the softball team, she had to become team captain. When I met Mark and fell in love, she started dating a string of men, each one flashier and less suitable than the last, as if trying to prove she could attract more attention. Her mother, my Aunt Carol, fueled the fire. To Carol, Chloe was perfect, sensitive, and brilliant. Any success I had was just luck. Any failure Chloe had was because the world was unfair to her. My own mother passed away when I was a teenager, so Aunt Carol was the closest maternal figure I had left on that side of the family. I tried to maintain a relationship with her for the sake of family unity, but it was always strained. It felt like I was constantly being judged against her daughter, and I always came up short. The baby shower was supposed to be a happy day. My best friend, Sarah, had organized it, and the room was filled with soft pastels, cheerful chatter, and the warmth of people who genuinely cared about us. Mark was there, his hand resting on my back, a proud and happy smile on his face. Friends and family had gathered, and I felt surrounded by love. For a few hours, I almost forgot about Chloe and her shadow. I opened gifts, each one a tiny sweater or a soft blanket, and my heart swelled with gratitude. People were kind, saying all the right things about how I was glowing and how Mark would be a wonderful father. Then, Chloe arrived, with Aunt Carol trailing behind her like a lady in waiting. The mood shifted almost immediately, a subtle drop in temperature that only I seemed to feel. Chloe's smile didn't reach her eyes. She scanned the room, her gaze lingering on the pile of presents. I saw her whisper something to her mother, and Aunt Carol patted her arm reassuringly. They made their way over to me, and I braced myself. "Anna, you look full," Chloe said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. It was the first jab, a small testing poke to see if I would flinch. Aunt Carol laughed, a high, nervous sound. "Oh, Chloe, what a thing to say. She means you look healthy, dear. Glowing." I forced a smile. "Thanks, Chloe. It's good to see you both." That was a lie. It was never good to see them. It was an obligation. Mark squeezed my shoulder gently, a silent signal of support. He knew how difficult his cousin could be. He had witnessed it countless times over the years. He understood the undercurrent of malice that ran beneath her every word. He always tried to shield me from it, but there was only so much he could do when we were all in the same room. The gift opening continued. I held up a tiny pair of hand-knitted booties from Mark's grandmother, and the room filled with appreciative murmurs. I felt a moment of pure, uncomplicated happiness. I was going to be a mother. This tiny human was already so loved. I caught Mark's eye across the room, and he gave me a look that said everything. It said, "This is our life now. It's perfect." Chloe chose that moment for her second attack. "You'd better enjoy this peace and quiet while you can," she announced to the room, though her eyes were fixed on me. "Once the baby comes, Mark will probably have to take on even more hours at work. You'll never see him." The comment hung in the air, ugly and sharp. It was a direct hit, aimed not just at me, but at my husband, at our life together. It was designed to plant a seed of doubt, of fear. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Sarah shot Chloe a dark look from across the room. Mark stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I'm looking forward to every minute of it, Chloe. I wouldn't miss it for the world." Aunt Carol rushed to her daughter's defense, as she always did. She's just being practical, Mark. Babies are a lot of work. She's just showing concern for Anna. Concern. That was the word she always used to mask Chloe's cruelty. It wasn't jealousy. It was concern. It wasn't malice. It was practicality. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that her daughter's version of concern felt a lot like poison. But I didn't. I just smiled tightly and moved on to the next gift, determined not to let her ruin this day. I picked up a beautifully wrapped box, the last one from the pile. It was from Chloe and Aunt Carol. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then began to unwrap it. Inside was an expensive-looking baby monitor, the kind with a video screen and all the latest features. It was a surprisingly generous gift. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe she was trying to be nice. I looked up to thank her, a genuine smile finally forming on my lips. But the look on her face stopped me. It was a cold, smug look, a look of triumph. And then she said the words that would change everything. She leaned forward slightly, making sure her voice carried across the quiet room. "You should enjoy all these gifts now," she said, her voice clear and cutting, "because this baby will ruin you." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that fell over the entire party. Every smile froze. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. It felt like all the air had been sucked out of the room. I just stared at her, the expensive baby monitor suddenly feeling like a lead weight in my hands. The words echoed in my head. "Ruin you. Ruin you." It wasn't a warning. It was a curse. A declaration. It was what she wanted to happen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a hot flush of shame and anger creep up my neck. I looked around the room and saw a sea of shocked and pitying faces. My special day, my celebration of new life, had been hijacked and turned into a stage for my cousin's toxic jealousy. Aunt Carol let out that same high, nervous laugh, but it sounded broken this time. "Oh, Chloe, you and your dark sense of humor. She's just kidding everyone. She means a baby changes everything." But no one was laughing. No one believed it was a joke. The malice had been too plain, too raw. I opened my mouth to say something, to defend myself, to fight back. But nothing came out. I felt small and powerless, pinned in place by her hatred. The party limped on for another half hour, the cheerful atmosphere shattered beyond repair. People made their excuses and left quickly, their goodbyes quiet and awkward. Soon it was just Mark, Sarah, and me, standing in a room full of pastel-colored debris and broken joy. The day was ruined. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that Chloe was just getting started. The drive home was silent. Mark gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. I stared out the window, watching the world go by in a blur, replaying Chloe's words over and over in my mind. "Ruin you." It wasn't just the public humiliation that hurt. It was the pure, unadulterated venom behind it. It was the realization that someone in my own family, someone I was supposed to have a bond with, wished me ill with such intensity. Finally, Mark spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I am so sorry, Anna. I should have thrown them out the second she opened her mouth." "It's not your fault," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. "It's just who she is." "No," he said, shaking his head. "This was different. This wasn't just some catty remark. She wanted to hurt you. Deeply. In front of everyone." He was right. This was a new level of cruelty, even for Chloe. For years, her jealousy had manifested in small ways. Backhanded compliments, subtle digs, spreading minor gossip. But this was a full frontal assault. "Why, though?" Mark asked, his voice filled with genuine confusion. "Why would she say that? What could possibly motivate someone to be so hateful about a baby?" That was the question that had been circling in my own mind. It felt like there had to be more to it than simple jealousy. And as we pulled into our driveway, I started to connect the dots. I confessed to Mark that I had been hearing things for a while, little whispers and odd comments that had made their way back to me through the family grapevine. Relatives had mentioned Chloe making strange remarks, questioning the timing of my pregnancy, hinting that things weren't as perfect as they seemed. At the time, I had dismissed it as typical Chloe behavior, sour grapes from a person who couldn't stand to see me happy. I didn't want to cause drama, so I ignored it. I told myself it would blow over. Now I realized that had been a mistake. Ignoring it had only allowed the poison to spread, to fester. It had emboldened her. We went inside, the cheerful nursery we had so lovingly prepared now feeling tainted by the day's events. I sat on the edge of our bed, feeling emotionally exhausted. Mark sat beside me, putting a protective arm around my shoulders. He was my rock, my safe harbor in this storm of family toxicity. We talked for a long time, going over every backhanded comment from Chloe over the years. We tried to understand the deep-seated resentment she held for me, but it was like trying to understand a foreign language. Her bitterness was so profound, it was incomprehensible to us. Just as we were about to go to sleep, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. I answered, my voice still shaky. "Are you okay?" she asked immediately, her tone full of concern. "I will be," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "Thank you for everything today, Sarah. I'm sorry it ended like that." "Don't you dare apologize," she said fiercely. "That was not on you. That was a calculated, vicious attack. And I think I know why she did it." I sat up straighter. "What do you mean?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "After you went to the kitchen for a minute. Before she made that big comment, I was standing near the back door," Sarah explained, her voice low. "I overheard Chloe talking to your cousin Jessica. She was saying the nastiest things, Anna." My stomach twisted into a knot. "What did she say?" "She was saying she had a bad feeling about the baby," Sarah continued, her disgust evident. "She told Jessica that you and Mark rushed into this. Then she said that Mark might be in for a big surprise in about 9 months. She was implying that you were hiding something from him." The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The whispers, the strange comments, the public declaration that the baby would ruin me. It all made a horrible kind of sense now. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty born from a moment of jealousy. This was a campaign. Chloe was actively spreading a rumor, a disgusting, baseless lie, that I had been unfaithful to my husband. She was trying to poison our family against me, to plant a seed of doubt in Mark's mind, to destroy my marriage from the inside out. The numbness I had been feeling was instantly replaced by a wave of pure, cold rage. It was so intense it almost took my breath away. This was a line. A sacred line had been crossed. She had not only attacked me, she had attacked my husband, my marriage, and my unborn child. She was trying to taint the most beautiful thing in my life with the ugliest lie imaginable. "Anna, are you still there?" Sarah's voice pulled me back from the brink. "I'm here," I said, my own voice sounding distant and strange to my ears. "Thank you for telling me, Sarah. I needed to know." We hung up, and I turned to Mark, my expression grim. I told him everything Sarah had overheard. I watched as his face shifted from confusion to disbelief, and then to a deep, quiet fury that was far more frightening than any shouting could ever be. He didn't say a word for a full minute. He just stood up and walked over to the window, staring out into the darkness. When he finally turned back to me, his eyes were hard. "We have to do something," he said. "We can't let her get away with this." I nodded, a new sense of resolve solidifying within me. The hurt and the shame were still there, but they were now being overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct. I was no longer just Anna, the people-pleasing niece trying to keep the peace. I was a wife and a mother-to-be, and my family was under attack. The time for ignoring, for turning the other cheek, was over. Chloe had started a war, and she had no idea how determined I was to win it. I knew then that this wouldn't be resolved with a simple conversation or a forced apology. This required something more. It required undeniable, irrefutable proof. It required a plan that would not only clear my name, but would also expose Chloe and her poison to the entire family, once and for all. The next morning, the anger had not subsided. It had cooled, hardening into a steely resolve. Mark and I sat at the kitchen table, the baby shower gifts still in bags by the door, a painful reminder of yesterday's disaster. The joy had been sucked out of them. They were just things now, tainted by Chloe's venom. "I want to call her," Mark said, pacing back and forth. "I want to call her and Aunt Carol and just let them have it. I want to scream at them until my throat is raw." I understood the impulse. A part of me wanted that too. I wanted to unleash all the hurt and rage that was churning inside me, but I knew it wouldn't work. "And what would that accomplish?" I asked, my voice calm and measured. "We yell at them. They deny everything. Chloe will cry and play the victim. Aunt Carol will accuse us of bullying her sensitive daughter. They'll twist it around and tell the whole family that we're the ones who are unhinged. It will be our word against theirs, and they have been laying the groundwork for this lie for weeks. We'll just look like we're overreacting to a joke." Mark stopped pacing and looked at me. He knew I was right. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "So what do? We just let her spread these disgusting lies about you? About our baby?" "No," I said firmly. "We don't let her. We dismantle her. We don't fight her on her terms. We fight her on ours. We need something they can't deny. Something they can't twist or gaslight their way out of. We need proof." "Proof?" he asked. "Proof of what?" "We can't prove she's a liar without—" He trailed off as he saw the look in my eyes. He understood what I was thinking. "It's an extreme step," I said quietly. "And it feels wrong that we even have to consider it. It's not for us, Mark. I have never for 1 second doubted you. And I know you have never doubted me." "Never," he confirmed instantly, his voice full of conviction. He came over and took my hands in his. "This isn't for us," I repeated. "It's for them. It's a weapon. It's the only thing that will shut them up for good." We both knew what I was talking about. A non-invasive prenatal paternity test. The procedure was simple, just a blood draw from me and a cheek swab from Mark. It was also expensive and, emotionally, a very heavy thing to do. It felt like we were letting Chloe's poison seep into the most intimate part of our lives. But the alternative, letting this lie fester and potentially divide our family forever, was unthinkable. After a long, silent moment, Mark nodded. "Okay," he said. "Let's do it. Let's get the proof." The decision was made. A weight settled in my stomach, a mixture of dread and grim determination. That same day, I made the appointment at a private clinic for the following week. While we waited for the appointment, I knew I needed to do some more digging. I needed to understand just how far Chloe's lies had spread. My first call was to my cousin Lisa. She was a few years younger than us, generally quiet and conflict-averse. She had been at the shower, and I knew she was friendly with Chloe, but not in her inner circle. She was the perfect person to ask for information without raising any alarms. I called her under the pretext of thanking her for her gift. We chatted for a few minutes about trivial things before I steered the conversation to the party. "It was a bit of an awkward ending, wasn't it?" I said, trying to sound casual. Lisa hesitated. "Yeah," she said finally. "That was really uncomfortable. I'm so sorry, Anna." "It's okay," I lied. "Chloe has her moments. I was just wondering, has she been saying things like that for a while?" The vibe just felt off. There was another long pause. I could hear her debating with herself on the other end of the line. "Look, Anna," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I don't want to get in the middle of anything." "You won't be," I promised. "I just need to understand what's going on. I'm not going to tell her you said anything. I just feel like I'm going crazy and I need to know if I'm imagining things." That seemed to do the trick. You're not imagining things, she admitted reluctantly. She's been saying weird stuff for a while now, ever since you announced you were pregnant. She keeps saying things like, I hope Anna knows what she's doing, and questioning how quickly you got pregnant after the wedding. She told me she thinks you guys rushed into it and that there might be complications down the line. The word complications sent a chill down my spine. It was so vague, yet so insidious. It was designed to create suspicion without making a direct accusation. Thank you, Lisa, I said, my voice tight. You have no idea how much this helps. My next call was much harder. I knew I had to talk to Aunt Carol. I needed to give her one last chance to do the right thing, to rein in her daughter. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I needed to document her response to confirm her role as Chloe's enabler. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, her voice wary. Anna, I was surprised to hear from you. Hello, Aunt Carol, I said, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. I'm calling because I was very hurt by what Chloe said at the shower on Saturday. I was met with an immediate defensive sigh. Oh, for heaven's sake, Anna, are we still on about this? I told you that's just Chloe's way. She has no filter. She didn't mean anything by it. It didn't feel like a joke. I pressed on, my grip tightening on the phone. It felt cruel, and it was said in front of all my friends and family. It was humiliating. Well, she is just so worried about you, Aunt Carol said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. It's such a huge life change, and Chloe is a very sensitive person. She feels things deeply. She was probably just overwhelmed with emotion for you. Emotion? I almost laughed. The only emotion Chloe had been feeling was pure, unadulterated jealousy. Her concern is causing a lot of pain. Aunt Carol, she is spreading rumors and making things very difficult for me and Mark. Aunt Carol's tone turned icy. I don't know what you're talking about. My daughter would never do such a thing. Frankly, I think you're being far too sensitive about all of this. It must be the hormones. You're blowing a silly, off-the-cuff comment completely out of proportion. There it was. The classic gaslighting trifecta. Denial, victim blaming, and an appeal to my supposed emotional instability due to pregnancy. She would not help. She would not listen. She was a brick wall, painted over with a thin veneer of fake concern. It was more than a silly comment, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. And you know it. This conversation has made it very clear where you stand. I stand with my daughter, she snapped. Someone has to protect her from these vicious accusations. Vicious accusations? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. She's the one making them. She's the one telling people my baby will ruin me. She's the one hinting that Mark isn't the father. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. For a second, I thought I had broken through her wall of denial. But then her voice came back, colder than ever. I have no idea where you are getting these fantasies from. You need to calm down, Anna. You're not thinking clearly. She hung up. I stared at my phone, my hand trembling slightly. That was it. I had my confirmation. Aunt Carol was not just an enabler, she was an active participant. She knew what Chloe was doing, and she was helping her. They were a team, and I was their target. The last shred of hope that this could be resolved peacefully vanished. They had left me with no other choice. This was war, and I was now armed with the certainty that I was on my own. But I also had a plan and a secret weapon on the way. The day of the appointment at the clinic was gray and overcast, a perfect reflection of my mood. Mark held my hand the entire way there, his presence a silent source of strength. The clinic was sterile and impersonal, a place of science and facts, which was exactly what I needed. I needed something to cut through the messy, emotional tangle of lies Chloe had woven. The procedure itself was quick and painless. A nurse drew a few vials of blood from my arm and Mark did a simple cheek swab. And that was it. We were told the results would be back in 7 to 10 business days. Leaving the clinic, I felt a strange sense of detachment. It was as if I was watching myself in a movie. The pregnant woman forced to prove her child's paternity because of a jealous cousin. It sounded like something from a trashy daytime talk show, not my actual life. But this was my reality now, and I had to see it through. The waiting period was agonizing. Every day that passed felt like a week. During that time, the family dynamic shifted from tense to openly hostile. It was clear that Aunt Carol and Chloe had gone on the offensive after my phone call. They were painting me as the aggressor, the unstable, hormonal pregnant woman who had attacked poor, sensitive Chloe for making an innocent joke. I received a few calls from other relatives, their tones ranging from confused to vaguely accusatory. "I heard you had a big fight with Carol," my uncle from my dad's side said. "Is everything all right?" She seemed really upset. I tried to explain my side of the story, but it was difficult. The lie Chloe had started was subtle. A whisper here, a hint there. My reaction, in contrast, seemed loud and dramatic. I was fighting a ghost, an insinuation that was hard to pin down and refute without sounding defensive and, well, crazy. It was a perfectly designed trap. The isolation was the worst part. I felt like I was being slowly pushed out of my own family. Invitations to small family get-togethers stopped coming. When I did run into relatives at the grocery store, the conversations were stilted and awkward. They would look at my growing belly with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of pity and suspicion. Chloe was winning. Her poison was working. One evening, about a week after our clinic appointment, I got a phone call from an unexpected source. It was my Uncle Robert, Chloe's father and Aunt Carol's husband. He was a quiet man who generally stayed out of the family drama, a stark contrast to his wife and daughter. I was surprised he was calling me at all. "Anna," he said, his voice low and hesitant. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all, Uncle Robert," I said, trying to keep the surprise out of my voice. "Is everything okay?" There was a long pause, and I could hear him take a deep breath. "No, not really. Listen, I'm not one to get involved in this nonsense. But I feel like I have to say something. What Carol and Chloe are doing is wrong." I was so shocked I could barely speak. To hear him admit that, to validate my feelings after weeks of being made to feel like I was the problem, was an incredible relief. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered. "That's not why I called," he continued, and his tone grew more serious. "I want you to be careful, Anna. This is getting worse than I thought. I overheard Chloe on the phone the other night. She was talking to someone named David. Mark's uncle, I think?" My blood ran cold. Uncle David. Mark's estranged uncle. David was his father's brother, and the two of them had a massive falling out years ago over a failed business venture. David had blamed Mark's dad, accusing him of cheating him out of money. It had been a nasty public feud that had split that side of the family. David was a bitter, angry man who held a serious grudge against Mark's father, and by extension, against all of us. He was the last person in the world Chloe should be talking to. "What were they talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I only caught bits and pieces," Uncle Robert said. But she was asking him a lot of questions about Mark, about his past, about old girlfriends, anything like that. She was telling him this story about how you two got married so quickly, about the baby coming so soon. She was feeding him her poison, and it sounded like he was eating it up. "She's looking for ammunition, Anna, and she's recruiting enemies of your family to help her." I hung up the phone, feeling a new and terrifying level of clarity. This was so much bigger and darker than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about making me look bad at a baby shower. This wasn't just about petty jealousy. Chloe was actively trying to destroy my life. She was systematically trying to turn my own family against me, and now she was reaching into my husband's family, seeking out its most toxic elements to help her in her campaign. She was trying to create a massive family schism, a firestorm of drama and accusations with me and my unborn child at the very center. Her goal was not just to make me unhappy. Her goal was my complete and utter ruin. A divorce, a custody battle. A family torn apart. That was her endgame. The sheer scale of her malice was breathtaking. She wasn't just a jealous cousin anymore. She was a saboteur, an architect of destruction, and she was using my own family as her building blocks. The knowledge was terrifying, but it was also liberating. It stripped away any lingering guilt I had about my plan. It erased any thought of reconciliation. Chloe and her mother had declared total war. They had escalated things to a point of no return. The next afternoon, an email notification popped up on my phone. The subject line was simple: "Your results are ready." I called Mark, who was at work. "They're here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm coming home," he said immediately. He was home in 20 minutes. We sat side by side on the sofa, my laptop open on the coffee table in front of us. I clicked on the link in the email and entered our case number and password. A PDF document loaded onto the screen. It was a simple scientific report, filled with numbers and legal disclaimers. But at the bottom of the first page, in a bolded box, was the conclusion we were looking for. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. I read the words once, twice, 3 times. A wave of relief so powerful it made me dizzy washed over me. Tears I didn't even know I was holding back began to stream down my face. Mark pulled me into a hug, and I sobbed into his shoulder. They were tears of relief, yes, but they were also tears of anger. Anger that we had been forced into this position. Anger that we had needed a piece of paper to validate the truth of our love and our family. When the tears subsided, the relief was replaced by something else. A cold, hard certainty. I now held the truth in my hands. A truth so absolute, so undeniable, that it could not be refuted. I had the weapon I needed. Chloe thought she was fighting a war of whispers and shadows. She had no idea I was about to drop a bomb of pure, unadulterated fact right into the middle of her web of lies. And I was going to make sure it was a very, very public explosion. With the DNA test results saved securely on my computer, a new phase began. This was no longer about defense. It was about offense. But it had to be done correctly. Simply emailing the results to Chloe and Aunt Carol would be unsatisfying. They would find a way to spin it, to claim the document was fake, or to accuse me of stooping to a new low. No, the reveal had to be public. It had to be in front of the same family they had been poisoning against me. They had shamed me publicly, and I was going to vindicate myself publicly. I called Sarah and told her the results were in. She let out a whoop of triumph. "Yes, I knew it. Now, how are we going to use this?" "I need a stage," I said. "A family event where everyone will be present, the whole family." Sarah was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Wait," she said. "Isn't your Grandma June's 80th birthday coming up in a couple of weeks? Your whole family will be there for that, right?" It was perfect. Grandma June was the matriarch of our family. Her parties were command performances. Everyone would be there. Chloe and Aunt Carol wouldn't dare to skip it. It was the ideal setting for the truth to be revealed. It would be my trial, and I would be presenting the star witness. Science. Now that I had a plan and a venue, I needed to start setting the stage. I wanted Chloe and Aunt Carol to be nervous. I wanted them to know that something was coming, but I didn't want them to know exactly what it was. I wanted them to spend the next 2 weeks stewing in their own anxiety. I decided to make another call to Aunt Carol. It was a calculated risk. I needed to rattle her cage without giving away my hand. I dialed her number, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. She answered with a clipped, "What is it, Anna?" "Hello, Aunt Carol," I said, my voice calm and even. "I'm calling because I think it's time we all talked. I would like to speak with you and Chloe together." "There's nothing to talk about," she said dismissively. "You made your feelings perfectly clear." "Oh, I think there is," I said, letting a hint of steel enter my voice. "You see, since our last conversation, I've managed to find some clarity on the situation that Chloe was so worried about at the shower. The situation you both seem so concerned with." There was a flicker of something in her voice, a tiny crack in her condescending facade. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do, I replied smoothly. I just want to give you both a chance to hear the truth from me before everyone else hears it. We can talk now, or we can talk at Grandma June's birthday party. The choice is yours. But believe me, one way or another, this conversation is going to happen. I didn't wait for her to respond. I continued. Actually, I've found the truth to be quite definitive. I think everyone will find it very illuminating. It really clears up any and all of those complications Chloe was worried about. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I had used their own coded language against them. I had hinted at a great reveal without giving her any concrete information to fight against. I had planted a seed of pure anxiety. If this is about that silly comment, Anna, you really need to let it go, she finally managed to say, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. It was shaky. It's about the truth, Aunt Carol, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. And everyone is going to hear it. I hung up the phone before she could reply. I leaned back on my sofa and allowed myself a small, grim smile. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for them to walk into it. In the 2 weeks leading up to the party, I was a woman on a mission. I wasn't just going to rely on the DNA test. I wanted to build a comprehensive case. I wanted to leave them with no wiggle room, no avenue for denial. I printed several copies of the DNA test results. I put one pristine copy into a crisp, white envelope and wrote Chloe's name on it in my neatest handwriting. This would be my centerpiece. Next, I worked on corroborating evidence. I called Cousin Lisa again. I explained that I was trying to put a stop to the rumors and asked if she would be willing to write down what she had heard Chloe say. She was nervous, but after I assured her that I would only use it if absolutely necessary and that I would protect her from any backlash, she agreed. She sent me an email detailing the conversation she had overheard at the shower, as well as other comments Chloe had made in the preceding weeks. I printed it out. Then I called Uncle Robert. I told him about my plan for the party. He was quiet for a long time after I finished explaining. I was afraid he would disapprove, that he would tell me I was stooping to their level. It's a bold move, Anna, he said finally, and it's going to cause a firestorm. I know, I said. But I don't see any other way. They won't stop unless they are stopped. Publicly. He sighed. You're right. They won't. Carol and Chloe, they get caught up in their own narratives. They've probably convinced themselves by now that they're the heroes of this story. He paused again. What do you need from me? Would you be willing to confirm that you overheard Chloe on the phone with Mark's Uncle David? I asked. Just a simple statement. I won't even need to use your name unless they try to deny it. He agreed without hesitation. They have gone too far this time. It's time for some accountability. He sent me a short, factual text message confirming the date and content of the phone call he had overheard. I took a screenshot of it. I now had a small but powerful portfolio of evidence. The DNA test was the knockout punch, but the statements from Lisa and Robert were the jabs that would wear them down first. They would prove a pattern of malicious behavior. They would show that this wasn't just a single joke, but a calculated campaign of slander. Mark was with me every step of the way. He helped me organize my evidence. He listened as I rehearsed what I was going to say, and he held me when the stress of it all became too much. You are the strongest person I know, he told me the night before the party. And tomorrow, everyone is going to see that. His faith in me was my armor. With him by my side, I felt ready. I was nervous, of course. My stomach was in knots. A part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. A public confrontation at my grandmother's 80th birthday party. It felt surreal. But the other part of me, the part that had been awakened by Chloe's cruelty, was ready. I was ready to fight for my family, for my reputation, and for the truth. Chloe had wanted to ruin me. Tomorrow I was going to show her and everyone else what I was really made of. The day of Grandma June's party arrived. The venue was a local restaurant's private event room, decorated with balloons and photos from throughout my grandmother's long life. It was supposed to be a place of celebration, but for me, it felt like a courtroom. Mark and I arrived early. I needed to get a feel for the room, to center myself before the rest of the family arrived. Mark's hand was a warm, steady presence on the small of my back. He didn't say much, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He was with me, 100%. Guests began to trickle in. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. I could feel the eyes on me, the curious glances, the whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when I looked over. The family was divided, and it was palpable. Some relatives gave me warm hugs, their support unspoken but clear. Others offered polite but cool greetings, their loyalty clearly lying with Aunt Carol and Chloe. When they finally arrived, it was like a scene from a movie. Aunt Carol entered first, her head held high, a defiant look on her face. Chloe followed close behind, her expression a carefully constructed mask of bored indifference. She was trying to project an image of someone who was above all this petty drama. But I could see the anxiety flickering in her eyes. They had walked into the trap just as I knew they would. They moved to the far side of the room, immediately surrounded by a small group of sympathetic relatives. They were building their fortress, preparing for a siege. I spent the next hour making small talk, accepting congratulations on the pregnancy, and trying to act as normal as possible. I was acutely aware of Chloe's gaze on me from across the room. She was watching my every move. I smiled, I laughed, I placed a hand on my belly. I wanted her to see me looking happy and serene. I wanted it to unnerve her. The party moved along as planned. There were speeches, a toast to Grandma June, and a lot of reminiscing. I watched my grandmother's face full of joy and love for her family, and I felt a sharp pang of guilt. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of her special day. But then I looked over at Chloe, who was whispering something to Aunt Carol, and they both shot a venomous look in my direction. The guilt vanished, replaced by a cold resolve. This wasn't just for me. It was for the health of the entire family. You had to cut out the poison before it killed the whole organism. Finally, the moment came. The birthday cake was brought out, the song was sung, and the candles were blown out. As people began to eat their cake, I knew it was time. I stood up, my glass of water in my hand. Mark stood up with me, a silent pillar of support at my side. "If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment," I said, my voice clear and steady. It carried across the room and the chatter died down. Every eye turned to me. I saw confusion on some faces, curiosity on others. From Chloe and Aunt Carol, I saw pure, unadulterated dread. They knew something was about to happen. "I wanted to say a few words," I began, my eyes scanning the room before landing directly on Chloe. "First, a very happy 80th birthday to the most wonderful grandmother a person could ask for. We all love you so much, Grandma June." There was a smattering of applause. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to clear the air about a certain concern that was raised at my baby shower a few weeks ago. A tense silence fell over the room. I could see Aunt Carol's face tightening, her knuckles white as she gripped her purse. Chloe just stared at me, her mask of indifference beginning to crack. "Oh my God," Chloe said loudly, rolling her eyes with theatrical flair. "Are you still on about that?" "It was a joke, Anna. Get over it." Her dismissive tone was exactly what I had expected. It was the opening I needed. I didn't raise my voice. I kept my tone calm, almost conversational. "No, Chloe, it wasn't a joke," I said, looking directly at her. "When you stood up in front of my friends and family and said that this baby would ruin me, that wasn't a joke. It was a declaration." I let that sink in for a moment. "For weeks before that day, you were telling other family members that you had a bad feeling about my pregnancy. You were telling people that Mark might be in for a surprise. You were deliberately and maliciously planting seeds of doubt about my character and my fidelity." Aunt Carol shot to her feet. "That is enough, Anna," she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "You are ruining your grandmother's party with these wild, baseless accusations. How dare you?" This was it. The confrontation had begun. I turned my attention to my aunt. The only one ruining things, Aunt Carol, is the person who has been systematically spreading a vicious lie about the paternity of my child. And the person who has been standing by and letting her do it. You both seemed so certain, so incredibly concerned. Chloe, you acted like you knew some terrible secret that I was hiding. I paused, then took a step forward. So I decided that it was only fair to get you a definitive answer. To put your concerns to rest, once and for all. I reached into the gift bag I had placed by my chair and pulled out the crisp white envelope with Chloe's name on it. I walked slowly across the room. The only sound the soft click of my shoes on the floor. I could feel every eye on me. I walked right up to the table where Chloe and Aunt Carol were sitting and placed the envelope on the table in front of my cousin. "This is for you," I said, my voice soft but unwavering. Chloe stared at the envelope as if it were a snake. Her hands were shaking. Aunt Carol was whispering furiously at her, "Don't open it. Don't give her the satisfaction." But it was too late. The entire room was watching, waiting. The pressure was immense. With a trembling hand, Chloe picked up the envelope. She tore it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper inside. I watched her face as she read the results of the non-invasive prenatal paternity test. I saw the color drain from her cheeks. I saw her eyes widen in disbelief, then flicker with panic. She looked up at me, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. She was speechless. Her entire narrative, the web of lies she had so carefully constructed, had been obliterated by a single piece of paper. I turned to address the rest of the room, my voice ringing with the clarity of truth. For anyone who has heard the whispers, for anyone who has been told a different story, let me make this perfectly clear. The document Chloe is holding is a certified DNA paternity test. It states, with 99.99% certainty, that my husband, Mark, is the father of my baby. A collective gasp went through the room. I looked back at Chloe, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. "So, it seems the only surprise here, Chloe," I said, my voice clear and cutting, "is how cruel and pathetic your jealousy has truly made you." The room erupted into a chaos of whispers and shocked exclamations. I saw my Grandma June's face, a portrait of horror and dawning comprehension. She looked from the paper in Chloe's hand to me, and then to her daughter, Carol, and a look of deep disappointment settled on her features. Uncle Robert simply shook his head slowly, a sad, resigned expression on his face. He had known this was coming. Mark's parents, who had been forced to endure the whispers and rumors about their son and me, were now staring at Chloe with expressions of pure, cold disgust. The truth was out, and it was devastating. Aunt Carol, ever the defender, made one last, desperate attempt to regain control. She shot to her feet, her face red and blotchy with fury. "How dare you?" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "How dare you bring a private medical document to a family party? This is an outrageous invasion of privacy. You are a sick person, Anna." I didn't flinch. I met her gaze without blinking. "You made my pregnancy a public issue the moment you decided to spread lies about it," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You made it everyone's business when you tried to destroy my reputation and my marriage. I am not the one who invaded my own privacy, Aunt Carol. You and your daughter did that. I'm just making the truth public. Now everyone in this room knows exactly what you both are." My words hung in the air, final and irrefutable. There was nothing more she could say. Her accusations of me being sick and invasive sounded hollow and ridiculous in the face of the truth. She had been exposed. Her hypocrisy laid bare for the entire family to see. She looked around the room, searching for support, for an ally, but she found none. All she saw were faces of condemnation, of shock, and of pity. She and Chloe were on an island, and the tide of family opinion was rushing out, leaving them completely stranded. The war was over. I had not only won, I had achieved a total and complete victory. The immediate aftermath was a blur of motion and sound. Aunt Carol grabbed a sputtering, pale-faced Chloe by the arm and practically dragged her out of the restaurant, their departure marked by a trail of shocked stares and hushed, angry whispers. They didn't say goodbye to anyone. They just fled. It was a retreat, a full-blown rout. For a few moments, a stunned silence held the room captive. Then, slowly, things started to happen. Mark's mother came over and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "I am so sorry you had to go through that, Anna," she whispered in my ear. "We never believed it for a second, but to hear the lies, I'm just so sorry." Her validation was like a soothing balm on a raw wound. The party effectively ended then and there. The celebratory mood was impossible to reclaim. People began to leave, but as they did, many of them came up to me and Mark. The relatives who had been cool and distant before now looked at me with newfound respect and sympathy. They offered quiet apologies for not seeing the truth sooner, for getting caught up in the drama. They had been manipulated, and now their anger was redirected to its rightful source: Chloe and Carol. As Mark and I were preparing to leave, Aunt Carol tried to make one last stand. I saw her car pull back into the parking lot. She must have dropped Chloe off and circled back. She got out and marched towards me as I was standing near the entrance. Her face was a mess of tear-streaked makeup and impotent rage. "You think you've won, don't you?" she hissed, keeping her voice low so only I could hear. "You think you're so clever, humiliating us like that?" I didn't feel clever. I felt exhausted, but I also felt a profound sense of peace. The burden of the lie was gone. I just looked at her, my expression unreadable. "It was never about winning, Aunt Carol. It was about the truth. You and Chloe forced my hand." "You've torn this family apart?" she accused, her voice cracking. "No," I said, my voice firm and resolute. "You did. You and Chloe did that when you decided my happiness was a threat. You did that when you chose lies over love. This isn't my fault. This is the consequence of your actions." I saw the fight go out of her. She had no more arguments, no more deflections. She was left with nothing but the ugly reality of what she had done. "I will not speak to you or to Chloe again," I continued, setting a boundary of solid steel. "Not until I receive a public, written apology from both of you, sent to every single person who was in that room today. And even then, I don't know if I can ever forgive what you did." She sputtered, speechless, as I turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. I didn't look back. A few minutes later, as Mark was putting our gift bag in the car, a different figure approached me. It was Uncle Robert. He looked tired, older than he had just a few hours ago. The shame he felt for his wife and daughter was written all over his face. "Anna," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. For all of it. For what they did, for what you had to do today. For everything." "It's not your fault, Uncle Robert," I said gently. "It is," he insisted, shaking his head. "I stood by for too long. I let it happen. I enabled her by staying silent." He looked me straight in the eye. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. They needed that. They needed to be held accountable in a way that they couldn't escape. You were brave today." Coming from him, that quiet, reserved man, the words meant the world to me. It was a small piece of validation, a sign that I had done the right thing, no matter how difficult it had been. It was a confirmation that I hadn't destroyed the family, but had perhaps started the long, painful process of healing it by exposing the sickness within it. The final piece of fallout came the next morning. My phone rang, and it was Grandma June. Her voice was thick with tears. "Anna, my dear," she began, her voice trembling. "I am calling to apologize. I should have seen it. I heard the whispers, the little comments from Carol and Chloe, and I chose to believe it was just silly drama. I didn't see the poison for what it was. I am so ashamed that my daughter and granddaughter could be so cruel. I am so sorry for the pain they caused you." Her apology was heartfelt and genuine, and it moved me to tears. "It's okay, Grandma," I said, my own voice thick with emotion. "It's over now. They left the party in disgrace," she told me. "And my phone has not stopped ringing this morning. The family is furious with them. No one can believe they would concoct such a horrible lie. They are utterly alone, Anna. They have burned every bridge." The consequences were real and immediate. Chloe, who had always craved being the center of attention, was now a pariah. Her social standing within the family, which she had valued so highly, was destroyed. Aunt Carol's position as a respected elder sister and aunt was shattered. They had gambled everything on a lie, and they had lost spectacularly. For Mark and me, the resolution was profound. The storm had passed, and our marriage was stronger than ever. The ordeal had forged us into an unbreakable team. The cloud of doubt and suspicion that Chloe had worked so hard to create was gone, scattered by the undeniable light of the truth. We were free. We were free from the constant stress of dealing with their toxicity. We were free from the obligation of maintaining a relationship with people who wished us harm. A few months later, I gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy. He had Mark's eyes and my smile. He was perfect. Holding him in my arms, I felt a sense of peace that was deeper and more profound than anything I had ever known. We were a family, whole and complete. About a week after we brought our son home, a single card arrived in the mail. It was from Aunt Carol. Inside, scrawled in her familiar handwriting, was a short, stilted paragraph. It talked about her regret over the misunderstanding and how she hoped we could move forward as a family. It was a non-apology, a pathetic attempt to smooth things over without ever admitting fault. It mentioned nothing of the lies, nothing of the DNA test, nothing of the public humiliation. It was hollow and meaningless. I read it once, then I walked over to the kitchen and dropped it into the trash can without a second thought. I didn't feel anger or sadness. I felt nothing at all. They hadn't learned a lesson about being better people. They had only learned a lesson about what happens when you get caught. They hadn't changed their nature. They had only been forced to change their tactics. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped needing them to be sorry. I just removed them from my life, cleanly and completely. And that, I realized, was the real victory. It wasn't about the public showdown or the vindication. It was about the quiet, peaceful freedom that came after.